the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, I'd like to take a moment of silence for H. Stephen Flynn, who is a town meeting representative, who passed away since our last meeting. For the record, I have looked at the return of service by the constable and state for the record that this meeting has been duly and legally noted. And I have heard from the powers that be, those who are more important than myself, who are out there counting, that we do have a quorum. So I am going to dispense with my usual comments, but I am obligated to point out that there are 10 fire exits around the auditorium here, and they're readily marked. So at this point, for the record, I've decided just to use the cards to vote as opposed to the electronic voting machine, since we only have one warrant article tonight. And I'll leave it to the town manager to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Cohen. I'm the town manager this evening. And I'm pleased to present this article on behalf of Linda Prescott and the Community Preservation Committee. This article really arrives here tonight, a result of many efforts across the community, and I want to recognize the team that really brings us all to this vote here this evening. Most notably, we want to thank the Warren-Pohl family for their outreach and efforts to preserve this historic open space property that goes back before the founding of this nation. And I also want to, when we were notified just about 3 months ago, on May 26th, Evan Belansky, our Community Development Director, received correspondence on behalf of the Warren-Pohl property regarding the family's efforts to preserve this property, and then we swung right into action. With Evan's assistance, with that of the Board of Selectmen, who sort of oversaw the efforts going forward, with the support of Dave McLaughlin, the Conservation Commission, who upon hearing the news of the availability of this property and recognizing that it was at the top of the list for open space plan parcel acquisition, to Dale Williams and the members of the Chelmsford Land Conservation Trust, who joined with us early in the efforts to promote the awareness of the land and to preserve the property, and who will rejoin us, assuming the property moves forward, in the efforts to preserve the property under a preservation restriction, in which they would be the nonprofit third party responsible for the enforcement of the preservation of the property, much as they do today for Sheehan Farm, Hart Pond, and Sunny Meadow Farm. Also, as I mentioned earlier, the Community Preservation Committee will pull together a midsummer meeting and immediately embrace the project unanimously. The Finance Director, John Souza, and Town Accountant, Darlene Lucier, who came and assisted in terms of the development of the debt burden and service for this property. How does it fit in with the existing schedule, which we'll go into it during the meeting, and our ability to fund this property, which is not funded by the property tax available funds, but by the community preservation surcharge. To Town Council Paul Haverty, who assisted us in the purchase and sale agreement and the legal process of moving forward. The Chelmsford Water District, who came out and supported this effort and came forth with a notion that one of the other benefits possibly for the future of the community might be as a reserved use for a municipal water supply in the unforeseeable future that lies ahead of us. Certainly the Finance Committee pulled together, again, a summer meeting, heard the report and offered its support. And then finally, I want to point out the efforts of Phil and Joanne Stanway and the Chelmsford Open Space Stewards, who did a tremendous job promoting this property endlessly, and then offering, even last weekend, the tours on both weekend days. So again, it's a coordinated effort that brings us here this evening. The motion that's before you is rather lengthy, again, prepared by town council, but I'm going to go through it in quick pieces to just summarize what's taking place. The motion begins by basically, the key here is we're asking for an appropriation of $1.2 million for which consists of 3 parcels of land totaling 54.3 acres. The parcels will be held for the purposes of open space, including without limitation for agricultural purposes and for a municipal well field / water supply. And there will be a perpetual restriction, as I mentioned earlier, placed on these parcels in accordance with the state law under the Community Preservation Act to ensure that this open space remains in its state. And in fact, as I'll touch upon later in this evening, we actually do a baseline survey of when we'll work, and when the town acquires a property, it will be assessed and recorded so that it's documented the exact condition of the property. And then finally, with all the financing aspects of the property, any proceeds that come from the financing in terms of what's called bond premiums and so forth is applied to pay down the cost and debt service on this project. So that's the legally approved motion as approved by bond council and town council. Here's just a quick image of the beauty of the property. Many of you have seen many photos that have been on social media, and also, again, many of you took the opportunity to tour the property. And as I mentioned earlier, Chelmsford is mostly developed, as we know, and here's the list from the existing open space and recreation plan of the largest parcels available in the community. And you can see here Warren-Pohl is right at the top. The Lowell Sportsman's Club, obviously there's no foreseen change in that use, but Warren-Pohl, as I mentioned earlier, topped the list in terms of the agricultural use that's out there and open space preservation by the Conservation Commission as part of their open space plan. And while we're on this slide, we want to take a moment to point out the next one in line, which is the Hennessy property, or 24 Misty Meadow, which last Wednesday evening, the Chelmsford Water District, after the rights of first refusal under the change of use were assigned by the Board of Selectmen, they appropriated $1 million last Wednesday to acquire that parcel of 41 acres for potential use as a municipal well field. And the same conditions that we speak of tonight are transferred to them. There'll be a preservation restriction placed on the property. It will remain in its natural state. And again, the effort there. So you can see by the actions of last Wednesday and tonight, if successful, over 94 acres of land will be permanently protected in the community. As I mentioned, it's the legal address for the main parcel is 95 Boston Road. It's 54 acres. It has frontage on 6 streets in the community: Acton Road, listed alphabetically, Bartlett Street, Boston Road, Fay Street, Hall Road, and Parker Road, which has direct access to the Wright Reservation. The agreed upon asking price or sale price is $1.15 million. The town commissioned 2 independent appraisals on this property. One was from Avery Associates at $1 million. The second one was from Minuteman Appraisals at $1.3 million. It's a unique property of land. We have the appraisal reports and the methodology. Even though you say, gee, there's a 30% variation, what ended up being the difference as we dug into it was their assumptions in terms of the type of roadway that could be constructed for a limited 7-house subdivision. And I think, quite frankly, Minuteman got it more accurate, because under the planning board's subdivision rules and regulations, you could go with a narrower lane as opposed to a larger subdivision roadway, which really shows the difference of $300,000. Here's an aerial plan. Forgive me, I know it's hard to see, and it's certainly hard to see on the handouts, but again, it just gives you the sense of space and the magnitude of the property, and you can see all the connections that it touches on in the community. As I mentioned earlier, when the property was valued by the appraisers, they had to determine what is the market value, and the determination really rested upon the idea that one could construct a 7-house lot subdivision off of Bartlett Street. And so that really was the determination in terms of what would be the market valuation of this property, and you could see how this was envisioned. Unlike Misty Meadows, this did not come before the planning board, so it's a conceptual plan, but clearly there is a market in today's economy, and that really drove the valuation of the property. Here's the debt service. As I mentioned, the total is $1.2 million. Many of you are familiar with how the town finances debt. Unlike a residential homeowner, we do not do level dollar debt like you'd have on your home mortgage. We pay level principal. So at $1.2 million over 10 years, we would pay $120,000 per year, and then you pay what we believe is a conservative 2% interest rate because, again, we borrow tax exempt. You can see the highest interest obviously is in the first year, it'd be $25,500, and obviously as you're paying down the principal, the interest payments are reduced. So your highest level of debt service is in the first year of $145,500. And you can notice there to the left, it's fiscal year 2022. So we would structure the debt so that the debt service first payment would come up after next July, and the reason for that sort of goes to how it fits into the debt schedule for the Community Preservation Fund. Here is the debt schedule in terms of their major projects, and what's noted there and what's highlighted is this is the final year that we're paying the debt service on the transformation of the Center Town Hall and the North Town Hall into the Chelmsford Center for the Arts and the Chelmsford Community Center. So basically this year, $272,000 will come off the books. And as I noted earlier, at $145,500, obviously the burden is lightening even with this project coming forward. And so therefore it can be absorbed. And then the bottom thing to note is the fund balance for the Community Preservation Fund is $2.4 million. Obviously the Community Preservation Committee did not think it was a wise move to spend all their cash, a large amount of their cash to purchase this property. Instead, they want to have the financial flexibility going forward for the community. And in fact, our finance director, John Souza, developed this chart, and I know it's hard to read, and again, hard to read on the handout, but the important thing to note is, I mentioned earlier, this year the debt service outstanding is $662,000. With this project next year, it drops down to $521,000, and again, it diminishes over time because, as you can see, we have the Sheehan Farm being paid off in 2023 and so forth under the level principal concept. But most importantly on this chart is the bottom is the fact that even with this property moving forward, the town would still have the annual debt service of over $660,000 in fiscal year 2022, and that amount obviously increases over time as we pay off principal. So the important thing to assure the community is we have the liquidity and the debt service capacity in the Community Preservation Fund to meet whatever future historic, open space, and community housing needs that may arise in the future. Again, in closing, the open space potential uses are agricultural, obviously walking trails, municipal well field, again, as a potential use. There's no immediate plans to test or develop a well field, but we want to reserve that right because it's a perpetual restriction, and it really just gives the town that flexibility in the future. And in speaking to the Water District, they do not envision there ever being a treatment plant on site. What they would imagine that if there were ever a need for a well field, they would sink the wells. You'd probably have a shed about the size of a small utility shed that would support the pumps for the well field, and then the water would be piped off-site to their existing treatment plants. And again, the use of this land is recorded in this vote tonight and would be described in the preservation restriction that, again, the third party, which would be the Chelmsford Land Conservation Trust, would sign with the Board of Selectmen, again, reviewed by Town Council. So in summary, the appropriation request is $1.2 million of borrowing. The debt service, again, is funded from the Community Preservation Fund, which is restricted in its allowed uses, $1.15 million for the purchase of the land, and then $50,000 for the preparation of the preservation restriction and the baseline survey assessment report of the property, which in the past we've used the Audubon Society. And it's, again, we just want to point out that this process and these efforts have been successful in the past, as I mentioned, with Sheehan Farm, Sunny Meadow Farm, and we think that this property sort of adds to the town's over 1,000 acres of conservation land. So that, Mr. Moderator, is my presentation this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation?
The Finance Committee unanimously recommends approval of Article 1.
Does the Board of Selectmen have a recommendation? Still not on, hold on.
Let's go to the other mic.
Well, now we only have one microphone.
The Board of Selectmen unanimously recommends approval of Article 1.
Thank you. Okay, now's the opportunity for any discussion, if anyone has any questions.
Mr. Moderator, Chris Garrahan, Precinct 8, Vice Chairman of the Chelmsford Conservation Commission. We strongly support this article. 54 beautiful acres of open space. It'll be protected in perpetuity. We'll have this open space forever. It's a wonderful asset to the community, and this is exactly what this whole Preservation Act is about, protecting land like this forever for future generations. So we strongly urge the representatives to vote in support of this tonight. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions, comments, or concerns? You can use this microphone, it's working now. Save you a few steps.
Alvin, Drehman, I just got confused on slide number 9. Could you possibly go to that? There, back one. There. You have lots, there 1 through 7. Was that just a theoretical development, or is that land that will be or potentially be sold?
Through you, Mr. Moderator, no, that's just a theoretical development in terms of what may happen to the property if it were not preserved. But under the town's purchase and the terms of this vote and the preservation restriction, none of the land will be developed. It will remain in its natural state.
Thank you.
Okay, this gentleman was here first. Go ahead.
Sherman, Horton, Precinct 6. Just a question, are there any buildings on this property, and do they represent any kind of liability or maintenance kind of issue?
There are some ancillary buildings that one would find with agricultural activities. We've looked at them. We've been told by the property owner they'll be removing their farm equipment, but we do have some small sheds on the property that appear not to be of concern structurally, but will remain on the property.
Sam Poulten, Precinct 8. First, bravo to everybody involved in this. And it's obvious that not only has everyone done their homework, but they've laid everything out for us to make this, in my mind, very simple. This is the right parcel, at the right price, at the right interest rate, 2% for the bond, at the right time, and for the right purpose. It's going to define the center of our town for generations yet to come and keep Chelmsford, Chelmsford. I urge this to be passed unanimously and without any further delay. Thank you very much to everybody.
Thank you. Anyone else? There appears to be no one. This requires a 2/3 vote. So all in favor, please raise your little chits. Any opposed? It's unanimous. So I will entertain a motion to adjourn. All in favor? See you in October.